Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Cynthia Spishak, and I serve as the Associate Administrator for Policy, Program Analysis, and International Affairs within the United States Federal Emergency Management Agency, also known as FEMA. It's an honor to be part of this esteemed forum. FEMA has enjoyed participating in the International Recovery Forum and learning from you over the past decade. We are coming together during an interesting inflection point for the field of emergency management. As we are all well aware, we are entering the third calendar year of a devastating global pandemic, which has challenged our systems, plans, and personnel while fundamentally reshaping societies. At the same time, we've faced simultaneous significant natural disasters as climate change is increasing the frequency and severity of disasters worldwide. The increased demand on first responders, emergency managers, local and national governments means we are confronted with solving problems that are well outside of the scope of what we've done before. Communities are also experiencing their own unique demands as they face longer recovery times from multiple types of emergencies and disasters, which may be compounded by repeat events. It is in this context that I'd like to share with you some perspective from my agency on forward-looking perspectives for building back better towards 2030, specifically as it relates to how we've learned from and implemented the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction and what priorities are necessary to make further advancements in disaster recovery. In order to approach priorities, such as enhancing preparedness to build back better, we need to develop solutions for recovery issues that are flexible and adaptable to meet the specific needs of the communities affected by disasters. Bringing key recovery stakeholders at all levels of government prior to an event together, for example, in recovery-focused exercises, can help stakeholders map out desired recovery outcomes in advance. We recommend a priority that focuses on partnership building around long-term recovery prior to disasters. Since the Sendai framework started in 2015, FEMA has created recovery-focused guides for state, tribal, territorial, and local stakeholders to support pre-disaster planning and preparedness efforts. Some of these guides include pre-disaster recovery planning guides for local, state, and tribes, a disaster housing guide, a disaster financial management guide, and building a private-public partnerships guide. So how can we still challenge ourselves to improve in a recovery preparedness, planning, and implementation? When it comes to achieving recovery outcomes in our current environment and the environment we can anticipate in the future, planning and preparedness initiatives need to capture potential cascading and escalating impacts in disasters. COVID-19 taught us that there are certain dependencies that we rely upon to accomplish recovery missions, such as trained personnel, people, and equipment. When there are shortages in those dependencies, we struggle to achieve our desired recovery outcomes. Plans, as they currently stand, don't always fully capture shortfalls if these dependencies are not available. Disaster planning and exercises are often incident-specific and do not consider competition for assets between simultaneous multiple incidents. Competition for scarce resources between multiple incidents will impact capabilities and can cause delays in desired response and recovery outcomes. Pre-existing community conditions, such as aging infrastructure or a lack of affordable housing, can become exacerbated post-disaster and can contribute to recovery challenges. More attention must be given to strengthening these kinds of systems pre-disaster. Establishing and integrating the desired recovery outcomes early in a disaster event can go a long way to realizing those desired outcomes sooner. Developing guidance and tools related to measuring progress and success, such as recovery indicators and metrics, could help stakeholders determine those steps that are necessary to achieve recovery from disaster. I'd like to speak to some of the emerging challenges we face and how Fema is addressing them. We know the risks in front of us are growing, and they are interacting with each other in a way that challenge our resilience. We are seeing tremendous and often rapid change in both the landscape of risk and our professional roles. As I've already mentioned, compounding multiple disasters, specifically how to deal with more frequent incident-specific natural disasters alongside long-term crises, such as a pandemic, will be an ongoing challenge looking out to 2030. I'll talk more about climate change in just a moment. However, one prominent emerging challenge I'd like to highlight has to do with the impact on personnel that I think we can all relate to. Since recovery can take months or years, the burnout of our employees is possible, which in turn can lead to high turnover rates and can impact the speed and quality of recovery operations. Providing funding for long-term recovery positions or mental health support may help address these issues. As is becoming clearer by the day, the rapid changes caused by climate change threaten and bring new risks to all communities. Fema is addressing the effects of climate change by making climate resilience an agency priority, starting with the creation of a climate resilience framework, as articulated in the 2022 to 2026 FEMA Strategic Plan, which addresses the following objectives. First, increasing climate literacy among the emergency management community. Second, building a climate resilient nation. And third, empowering risk-informed decision-making. The emerging risks of climate change require climate resilient communities. Steps identified in FEMA's Climate Adaptation Assessment Report support this need. I'll give you a couple examples. First, by strengthening preparedness and readiness efforts, we can address new and emerging risks that are the result of warming climate. Second, by developing strong coordinated partnerships that leverage the resources and expertise of the federal interagency, state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, the academic field, nonprofit organizations, and the private sector. Third, acknowledging the disproportionate impact disasters have on underserved and minority communities and targeting resources to these communities. Fourth, incentivizing risk reduction by leveraging federal level investments to encourage resilient behavior at every level of government, such as insurance coverage, resilient and sustainable building code standards, and mitigation investments. Fifth, leveraging available climate data and future conditions to make risk-informed decisions regarding planning for, responding to, and recovering from disasters. And last, but not least, building climate resilience and adaptation knowledge and capability within the global emergency management field. FEMA has also taken many steps to address climate change through changes in our programs. I'll give you a couple examples. Our Recovery Office is maximizing and expanding mitigation funding provided to communities through its Public Assistance Program. It will incorporate climate adaptation and change into risk reduction assistance and develop and implement national risk reduction efforts with our Mitigation Office. Recovery is also supporting a multi-year initiative to incorporate climate literacy into relevant training, planning, grant eligibility, and exercises, as well as efforts to develop a communication strategy and a charge to establish a climate change community of practice in the agency. As the risks of climate change increase, the risks to underserved communities also increase. The emergency management field must incorporate principles of equity into its programs and services to reduce risks to historically underserved people and communities. FEMA is taking the following steps to build equity into its recovery programs and to make sure the assistance it provides to individuals following a disaster is equitable by expanding program eligibility to better support underserved survivors and increase their opportunity to receive assistance from FEMA, improving access to programs and services by reducing unnecessary administrative burdens, and increasing outreach and technical assistance to those that need it most, improving customer experience and operational messaging to make sure all survivors and communities have the information they need to make the right decisions for their recovery, and improving the collection and analysis of data to better understand how recovery programs support underserved and minority survivors and communities, and how to best leverage that data to improve the equity of recovery outcomes. FEMA is committed to leading the emergency management community to take on the challenge of climate change for years to come. In closing, FEMA's 2022 to 2026 strategic plan provides a starting point to address these issues. Central to our plan is a people-first approach. The idea that ultimately disasters are about people who experience them and the people who respond to them. Forums like this one afford the opportunity for us to reflect on what we can learn from this moment, from each other, as emergency management professionals, policymakers, and practitioners. We have the responsibility to think about how we can use this moment to trigger positive change and better prepare to support our communities and nations in the future, given ongoing and emerging risks. We can continue to look to the Sendai framework for guidance on building back better as we adjust and innovate to meet our real challenges. Thank you again for this opportunity to share my thoughts with you during this year's International Recovery Forum. We look forward to participating in fruitful exchanges and presentations through this and future events.